welcome to the Dabble and Drive podcast. This is going to be our pilot episode. My name is Danny. I'm with MF Customs, and to my right here, I have Donnie. Go ahead and introduce
Hi
yourself.
everyone, I'm Donnie B, and people probably know me as Donnie B on YouTube, but I am the performance parts manager at Anderson Ford Motorsport.
And as I stated, I'm Danny. I'm with MF Customs. A little background on me. Way Wald. I run MF Customs, one of the co-founders. Been doing custom electronics for automotive for close to 20 years. Worked out to where anytime I was building a customer car, if we needed a part that just wasn't available, we would create it. And eventually, we were finally talked into doing what you see behind me on my screen, um, making it more publicly available for everybody. Outside of that, I got some SN95s, SVOs, and did drag racing in the early 2000s. Did the Fun Ford events until that all died off. Kind of got out of racing and went to just doing building cars for people. Still do it all as a hobby. Um, but outside of that, you know, I have a day job in IT. I enjoy it, and will continue doing it until I retire. Oh, that way. Your turn, Donnie.
Okay, all right, so yeah, the car thing has always been just a hobby of mine, probably since I was in my early 20s. I didn't get into it right away, but my background is actually in the corporate world, insurance industry, and stuff like that. And it was actually through my wife that this opportunity at Anderson Ford Motorsport actually opened up, and I became the motorsport manager there. And so, yeah, the car thing has always been a hobby. It's just recently been my career, I'd say, for the last 4.5 years now. Yeah,
Okay.
because July is my anniversary date. So, yeah, the actual motorsport industry and stuff I've only been a part of for just over 4 years, but the car hobby or Mustang hobby in general has been mostly just a hobby since my probably I'd say mid 20s.
Okay.
No, I'd say early 20s. Early 20s when I got in trouble with it, I guess I could say, to where it became like a true hobby, something that I just kept along with. But I came from the corporate world and then got into the parts industry, motorsport industry just recently. I guess you can say about 4 years ago. But I do truly enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's cool to innovate and work with good companies like MF Customs and others and everything. So yeah, I don't plan on leaving it anytime soon. But my career path has been kind of interesting. Never expected to be part of this industry. I always thought it would be part of just a hobby of mine. Along with YouTube, I never meant that to be anything either. But it's just kind of fun to make videos every once in a while, showing off some things and doing things and talking to people. So that's who I am. That's my background, and I'm sticking to it.
Awesome, man. Do you want to give a quick intro on why we are doing this type of podcast?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
let's talk about it a little bit. I thought that, there's, of course, other podcasts and stuff out there, really good ones, people that have been in this space for quite a while. But it's always cool to bring a different perspective into it. We both, Danny and I both have, backgrounds into an industry where it's not just a hobby, right? You know, we actually get to see behind the scenes in regards to, especially over the last couple of years, where it's been more of a focal point in that supply chain, working with manufacturers, R&D, development, and stuff. So I think we could bring some cool stuff to the table into this space. And of course, we'll be able to cross over into things that people have already talked about. But I think just having extra perspective and stuff, regardless of how many eyes actually see it or how many ears actually hear it, I think it's always cool to have more information out there with people that have experience.
Yeah, and Donnie, you came to me about a month ago, a little over that. We started talking about doing this, and I like the idea for sure. I think it'll be fun. We'll see how it goes. You are right. There are other podcasts out there, and the idea is not to take away from those. We're here to augment those. There'll be a lot of soapboxing on this one. I think we'll say
Sure.
we'll try to keep it to a minimum or a maximum, depends on the day or how that goes. And a lot of the stuff will be focused. I think will focus a lot around things that we see in the industry or what we're seeing with people coming to us, like the Q&A stuff, like how they might call into Anderson Ford or MF Customs for questions, and we're getting repeat calls on things. We might bring that stuff up as eventually tech tips, where we'll put the tech tip in here, but we'll also cut that one little section of the tech tip out of the video and then post that to our corresponding channels as well, just so it's out there. So this way it's searchable, it's out there on multiple different channels. So this way there's a better chance of people finding it. So that's kind of the thought, and I'm on board. Anytime I can sit and talk about cars, I'm game. I'll do it all day if I could. My customers know
Sure.
that too. So I want to go a little bit over the history on how we met, which is going to have another segue following that. So I started posting late 2021, the adapter you see behind me. I started making posts on this because I saw an empty spot in the market for the SN95 group. We never originally planned on doing anything for the Fox bodies. We did some stuff prior for Fox bodies for Holly, but they were one-offs, like I mentioned earlier. But Holly already offered the 937F kit, and I didn't really want to get into that. A lot of people wanted new wiring. There's a lot of good reasons to go to it. It was lacking, which has been fixed, I would say, for the most part on the on your kit now, the Gen 2 kit. But so when I started posting on this, one day I get a message from your service manager, I believe, Ryan.
Yep.
I still laugh every time I think about it because, he messages me through Facebook Messenger. His profile has no picture. There's no data in his Facebook. And he's like, "Hey, I work for Anderson Ford. I think your product is perfect. You should come and talk to us about it." I kind of went back and forth. I'm like, there's plenty of scams out there anymore.
Sure.
And I was kind of leery on it. And eventually I thought, I was going up to Springfield, Illinois anyway to drop off some parts for somebody. And I dropped in, and here we are. We sat down, we talked about the product. We discussed what the concept of it was, and at that point, I've already started doing the Fox body stuff because people were requesting it anyways. So we went for it, and we just did the Fox body and the SN95 to start out with, and here we are. You guys were really excited about the product. You guys are our only dealer at the moment that takes our kit and makes a full Holly kit that you can take and put a Holly ECU in a car in under 90 minutes. And you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a little extra context. Ryan bought an SN95. He bought a 95 Cobra, I believe. And that's what prompted him to want to find something because, like Danny mentioned, the SN95 market just got completely skipped over. Play kit or plug and play in Holly's eyes, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
And the Fox body kit was the only thing. And you heard rumblings of people attempting to make those kits work on SN cars, which some were able to do it successfully. There was a guy on YouTube, I believe, that was doing a video series, and I don't even think I even finish that series because I don't think he ever got it completed. Or if he did, I just lost interest because of finding out about you.
I
But
I know what series you're talking about. I watched it.
yeah, okay. So anyway, I digress. But um, the context was is that we got really popular again because one of the things I really like to do is make kits and stuff that just is known to work.
Hmm.
And so this Fox Body kit and stuff, we installed one on the car behind me here. Did this a couple years ago, and because I had to be sold on it, right? Because I don't like to sell stuff I don't know if it works or not. At least stuff that I know I can promote and recommend. So we got this on my car, and I know that it works. Got it tuned in pretty well and stuff. Learned some of the tricks and things in regards to how finicky some of the ECUs can be in regards to voltage and so on and so forth. So I really wanted to have something to carve out a corner of the market because again we're well not again but we are a small business even though we've been in business since 1989. Anderson Ford is a small business in Clinton, Illinois. It's actually a car dealership for people that didn't know. It's a Ford franchise store. My section of the business is just a corner in the back with a warehouse that stores some parts. So that's kind of where that is. But I really carved something out for the guys that had SN cars because we all know that Fox bodies were becoming more and more expensive. And the next thing that still has a push rod Windsor motor in it is an SN95, and those cars were still not getting the respect, I guess you can say, at the time. I think that's kind of gone by the wayside now, but at the time, there was just you could still get one of those cars relatively like cheaper than a Fox body, and so I was like, what could we come up with that would work? And of course, I talked to my Holly rep, who happened to be Rick Anderson, and I was talking to him about like, hey, what would it take to make this work on an SN95? And of course, he has knowledge from the old PMS system and stuff, what he needed to do to make stuff work. And so then Ryan brought it up to me that he talked to you
Hmm.
that you are coming out with a plug and play adapter kit to just convert everything to work with Holly. No extra wiring needed, no new wiring harnesses needed. Just plug in a wideband, plug in your power and ground, and load a tune. Everything works. AC, the CCRM, all that stuff. So I'm like, that's really cool. And then when he mentioned that you would make a trip up to Anderson Ford at some point, and of course, when you actually did show up, I was surprised because a lot of vendors, don't travel to small businesses, especially if they're looking to sell a product. So that was cool that we got to have that one-on-one interaction. And then, yeah, it was just like, cool. When it's ready to go, let me know. We'll put kits together because, again, I like doing kits. I like having everything. And of course, we're a Holly Elite dealer, so we can actually, get all the Holly parts and stuff and do all that business and everything. And so, yeah, I was extremely happy to do so. And of course, with more stuff coming down the road and the Gen 2 kit and everything, like you mentioned at the very beginning, that was a brainchild of both of us. And of
Yep.
course, you executed it and along with other things in the future. So, yeah, it's been an excellent little partnership we've got going on. And yeah, so that's how the introduction, I guess, met because you saw what we were seeing too is that there was no market for this. And, it's been, hitting the road and hit the path running ever since. It's been great.
Well, and I do want to touch on a topic, yeah, you brought up is small businesses. If small businesses don't support other small businesses, which sounds kind of weird, they'll go away. And the one thing that I miss a lot is the speed shops that have 60 plus years of combined knowledge when you walk in there. You got like a dad and a son in there that have been racing since the 60s, and they've run every engine combination known to man. And you could walk in and be like, hey, I want a certain cam for this build I'm doing. And they'll just look at it and go, no, you don't want that cam, you want this. Um, or you want to buy this product, and they listen to what you're doing and they're like, no, here's a better option. Finding people or finding businesses that can still do that is starting to get rare. And I'd like to see that start to come back. So part of our business model is we're going to work with the smaller businesses first. Um, not saying there's anything wrong with Jegs, Summit. I mean, those are the big ones, right? But you're not going to be calling them when you can't figure out why LED 7 on your Terminator X doesn't come on. Now, you might be listening to this going, well, I'd call Holly. Well, the idea of buying from a small shop, it might cost you a little more, but you're going to get somebody that can pick up the phone, take time, and actually help you solve your problem. And that's why I really push for people to either purchase from Anderson or from a local, you know, reseller that has what they're looking for. So
Right.
soapbox, sorry.
That's okay. I think you should also mention now, talking about how since you send a lot of people our way, which we greatly appreciate and stuff, because again, we like to push that every once, we know the stuff works,
Yep.
right? That's the whole point of it. We know it works, and we have a track record of all the stuff that we've been doing works. But and I'm just going to say this now because I know Danny's brought it up and stuff, but we are two separate entities, right? Danny doesn't work for me. I don't work for Danny. We're two separate businesses.
Yep.
Danny, if you want to elaborate.
Yeah. So it's a funny joke. I almost wore an Anderson's shirt tonight just to confuse people. For those watching the video of this, I probably get at least one or two phone calls a week asking for information. And I can tell right away that they're looking at Anderson's website and they're looking at XYZ parts. And I help them all the way through the process. And then at the end, they're like, okay, well, I'd like to place the order. I'm like, well, you'll have to call this number because they think we are part of Anderson Ford Motorsports and we're not. We are our own company. We're 2 hours and change apart, travel distance. I'm in the St. Louis area, and you're up in the Clinton, Illinois area. So, yes, for the record, I am not part of Anderson Ford.
I can second that. As a witness.
Yeah. It's a great partnership for sure.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to keep building on it. We got a lot of neat stuff coming in down the pipeline, stuff that's been kind of hinted about and stuff that hasn't. But you'll just have to wait and see for those. Now,
absolutely. And guys, real quick, Danny, I just want to mention, just because we touched on it, the Gen 2 kit was literally the collaboration between me and Danny. And just to kind of briefly go over it, Danny, you've always made posts and stuff saying, oh, I should have done it this way from the beginning and everything like that. And there was a post made on one of the Facebook groups that we belong to. And the post was simply just talking about how the idle air control voltage is supplied from the Holley ECU versus how Ford did it, which was through the injector harness. And I was just thinking to myself, like, well, son of a bitch, why can't we just go ahead and do that?
Yep.
Like, what's stopping us from doing this? Is everyone, ever since the 937F kit, got discontinued? I mean, it's no secret. You can go to Holley's website, look up the part number list, build yourself the exact same kit. All those parts exist today. And everyone started doing that, right? You have, I don't remember all the places that are doing it, but LMR's one. And I have nothing against people doing that. We stepped in and started doing that as well. But then everyone was doing it. And I'm like, well, if everyone's doing the same thing again, there's nothing really special about it. You're kind of just, following the same path as Holley. So after reading that post, I reached out to Danny and said, you know what? Why in the hell aren't we doing this? Why aren't we all know the OEM Ford stuff works? You're the one that taught me that the sensors, the MAT and CTS, it's just Ford modular scaling.
Yeah.
So why the hell aren't we switching it over?
Yep.
Danny's like, I can do it.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of Ford, and everybody does it. But why change something that works, right? They've known that scaling has worked for years. All they've done is just change the connector or change the sensor over years, but the scaling's still the same. But to go on that a little bit, you reached out to us like, hey, let's fix these harnesses with your fix that you talked about, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. but let's fix it right. Let's also do what we do to them. And so people are aware, what we do is we take and we won't go into high detail on this, we'll just cover it real quick, is we take the original Fox body harness that Holly sold, we put on OEM style Ford connectors. As you know, I mean, these cars are old, so finding original connectors is getting tough. But we do partner with someone who makes really good recreations of the originals and some of the original stuff. Well, we replace them with Ford connectors, so there's no need for a GMLS uh, idle air control, not idle air control. Oh my god, sorry guys, the coolant temp, manifold air temp, um, some random weather pack 3-pin connector that you got to splice in for your TPS. Some cheap standard products idle air control valve connector. I'm like, let's if you're going to send these to us to have us fix the idle air control valve, let's just do the whole thing. And I don't think he even thought about it for more than a minute. You were just like, yeah, let's just do this.
Let's just do it.
And
Do it. Let's do it right. Let's do it like how you said before. Let's do it how Holly should have done it from the beginning.
exactly. And and so people realize one thing. I hope people realize is, I love our adapter, right? But I also understand that there's a need for the Holly stuff. You got to replace your harnesses. You might be doing a project like Nakia Brutal, who's doing I think it's called the Poop Coop. Granted, it went
Hmm.
carbureted, but maybe you got a car that has zero wiring in it. Holly makes perfect sense. It's everything you need right there. So, well, I will recommend that way. I recommend our stuff when it comes down to, are you good with crimping? Are you good with wiring schematics just to make things work? Because Holly doesn't work right out of the box. There's stuff you got to do. And if you're like, nah, I'm
Hmm.
not really comfortable with it, go the plug and play route because everything's going to
Right.
work. You're not going to be upset because, oh man, I just did 12-hour bang out job of installing the Holly and go down the road and it's hot and I want to turn my AC on and find out I don't have AC. You know, with ours, just it works like the factory. So there's two really good options on the market. So I don't know how we
And
got
soon
down
to be
that.
even more.
Yeah,
Just a seek. Just a hint.
yeah.
The hint.
Soon to be more options. Don't know how we got down that
Hmm.
rabbit hole, but that's easy enough for me.
Yeah, we can talk about specific kits in another episode if you
Yep.
guys are interested, which is another like whole topic. Like I truly do want to talk about that at some point because we see. I guess the talking about Facebook groups and stuff like that. People post questions out there, and some of them, excuse me, are extremely repetitive.
Yep.
Um, for example, like people ask, "Hey, I bought a 937 kit, which is the universal Ford kit, which is a big load of horse shit because all it is, it's a GM kit with a Ford style injector harness.
Yep.
That's it. But yeah, I'd say for another episode, if you guys are interested, we could really dive into different kit options and all that jazz and stuff like that. Because it makes me sound kind of, you know, hostile towards them at the beginning. But at the same time, I'm not. So I think that could be left for another episode. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Gen 2 kit and stuff like that, I think was a good option to bring to the Fox Body community and stuff. And as an example, so I don't want this to just be all about me and the Anderson kit, but Danny's kit is a perfect option. For example, we have a car in the shop right now. The car's only got like 26,000 original miles. It was originally a Ford press car, and it from Michigan. And is a beautiful car, stored and stuff like that. Really low mileage, really clean. And he brought it to us to have service install a Holly kit and install a new motor. Well, looking at his wiring and everything, and Danny, you saw this car in
Yep.
person when you made a delivery to me. Um, I mean, he bought an old 937F kit from somebody years ago. Um, and he said he wanted us to install it. Well, I called him and said, hey, I'd love to do this for you, but there's a better kit out there for you because this car's in such good shape. This wiring is not all hacked up, not been converted or switched back and forth or things spliced into it. There's a kit called the MF Customs adapter that we sell. I think you'd be better off using that. And of course, the guy was, happy to keep his factory stuff because he said he wanted us to upgrade it, but not to take away from what it is. And the cool thing about this kit, and I don't think I ever mentioned it yet, but I want to mention it now. It's reversible,
Yep.
fully reversible. So, say you have a car, you want a Holly EFI in it, and turns out you go to sell the car later down the road, but they don't want Holly EFI in the car when you sell it, or you want to keep the Holly EFI, put the stock EEC back in it, and you don't have to worry about the wiring harness. It's all going to work just like it did before. So I think that's why it's really nice to talk about both options like that,
Yep.
because there's always great examples of either one, right? My 87 back here, this car needed a new wiring harness.
Yep.
It was hacked up terribly before because it was converted to mass air. It's an 87. So it had their original harness in it that was hacked up to include a mass air harness. And then it had a different O2 harness or something where the wires were different. So they hacked that. So yeah, it had to go. It just had to go. So that's why an example like this versus that 26,000 mile original car would be a perfect candidate for Danny's kit and stuff. So there's going to be examples of both. I really wanted to put that out there that there is good reasons for both kits to exist.
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to clarify one thing. That car is absolutely gorgeous. The reason why it's getting a different engine is if you're listening to this, we've all wanted to go faster. And that's what this person's going to do too. There's nothing wrong with what's in there. They are just building a very nice setup. I know what's going in it, but it's not my car to talk about. But that's why. So it's not, anything other than the guy just wants to go faster, and he's getting a great setup. The other
Speaking
thing,
of which, real quick, just on the last part of that subject, there's going to be some videos coming to YouTube on that car. Just saying. So if you guys are interested to hear about or see this car that we're talking about, stay tuned to both our channels because, again, Danny's kit's going in there.
Yep.
So Danny's might be involved with that one. And, of course, I'm going to film some of it too and everything. So definitely stay tuned on that one.
As long as timing works out, I'm looking forward to it. The other thing I want to mention, talk on too, is you talked about our kit being reversible. That is a really good thing right now. Not to pick on Holly, but we're doing Holly ECU repairs, as you are aware. Donnie, not everybody on this might be aware, but we were repairing Holly ECUs. We did just end that process. We will test them, but repair is out. The reason being is we just couldn't keep up with the demand. It was taken away from everything else.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep. In the 3 months that we started June. Well, it's about 4 months now. In that 4 months time frame, we had over 200 ECUs come through here.
Holy moly!
So it was taking away from
kinds or all just one.
What?
Different kinds or like just Terminator X?
Mainly Terminator X's and X Max. We did get a couple Dominators through here that got bricked that we were able to recover. They did go to Holly. Holly couldn't recover them. We have a little trick that we can usually recover them. We did recover them. And we had an HP that came in that needed a new USB port put into it. But mainly it was all Terminator X's. And that's one benefit of being reversible is if your Terminator X for some reason goes bad, and it's a component, so it can go bad. If you keep your stock ECU, you can just disconnect the adapter. You can leave the adapter even installed. You can just disconnect it, put your factory ECU back in, and if you were mass air, put your mass air meter back on, and you're pretty much golden. You can just go. You're not down waiting for 6 months for your Holly to come back out and say, here you go, your ECU's been replaced because it was found bad, or it happened 14 months after you bought it and you're now stuck without an ECU and you got to buy another one. So that is one nice benefit. We hated the end of service, but when you're talking the amount of ECUs that were coming in here, I was doing 8 to 10 hour days, starting in the evenings and working most of the nights to try to keep up with it, along with a couple others, and it was way too much. We couldn't offer our product because we just were so busy with that. So that's why we made the hard decision of we'll still test them, So if you got one that's a couple years old and Holly doesn't want to touch it, we'll test it and see if we can determine what's wrong. But outside of that, we won't be able to do repairs.
Good
So
to know. Yeah, I didn't know you discontinued that service.
we hated to,
Crazy.
but we had to. It was a
Yeah, I get it.
decision to. People want the adapters and they're tired of waiting. So now we have them back in stock, and they're going out as quick as we can get them built too. So I can't complain. Um, now, I do want to go over to the topic of we made a collab video this week for setting up your idle air control valve. And we're human. We made a mistake in that video. Not really a mistake. We missed a piece of information. I wasn't focused on it because I was more focused on how to do the physical pieces of getting your idle air control valve set up and running and working correctly. But there was one piece that should have been touched. And Donnie, what did I forget?
Assigning it to the pin map.
Yeah, I made a rookie mistake. Yeah, I didn't discuss on
To
how
be
to assign
fair,
it to the pin map.
to be fair though, we did preface the video by saying, "Hey, at this point, you should have already dialed in your fueling," and we even mentioned that, "Hey, you can't change the IAC valve to control through the 3.5-inch touchscreen," meaning that at this point, you should have already switched it over in the software to the pulse width modulated and assigned it to the pin map. However, like in full disclosure, you're right. We should at least said or showed, "Hey, once you do switch it over, before you even start, messing with the settings, you do need to drag it over to the B3 or B4 slot, whichever it is,
Yep,
on the outputs." And
B3.
so, yeah, like Danny said, we're human. We did make a slight error. I wouldn't. We just omitted a piece of information that most people, I think, would have known. But yes, if you're going to switch it over to a pulse width modulated 5-liter Ford idle air control motor, you do have to assign it on the outputs in the pin map.
Yep. So, I'm okay with admitting we made a small mistake. Again, I don't think it's a big deal. I'd rather just admit to it. I wasn't focused on that when I was doing that video. The video was all around, and just so people understand, if you don't know why we did that video, I was asked. I wrote a really nice review, step by step, on how to set up your idle air control valve in the software. Like all the settings that we start out with, how do we get certain numbers, all of those features. So the idea there was someone's already got this stuff set up. I'm just getting them to a running point of where they need to go to get it configured. So I wasn't thinking 10 steps back on, doing the output, but it should have still been discussed. And, we learn, we're human. I wrote it down and I learned from my mistakes. I mean, that is what the evolution, that's what that picture is behind me, is the evolution of our adapter. We learn. Um, I still make this one, Donnie. I
Do you?
still make this one. This one, I get Ford. Ford buys them. Dealerships do. This one is our live data for EEC4 because it's got an
Oh.
OBD2 port.
Huh.
So I make maybe one of these a month. They go in a nice
Wow.
housing now, but this was the original prototype.
Sure.
So just to point that out. But that's how we got to where that one and then production.
I do want to say real quick
Yeah.
on in regards to that first video that we made, talking about how we start out with adjusting or making adjustments to parameters for the idle air control motor. If anyone is interested on setting up a bass tune for themselves, we offer them as just simple like bass tunes that you fill out a Google form for a small fee, and then we do a lot of this stuff and build based off tunes that we know have worked on other vehicles and stuff like that, tailoring it to more specifically your vehicle. But if you want to have us maybe walk through building a tune from scratch and stuff, because it'll be more universal, right?
Yeah.
It may not work for everybody, but for the first time user, maybe it might be nice to see what you would want to do opening up the software for the first time and saving yourself a tune and putting it in your SD card. If you guys are interested in that, make a comment. Um, I'll read the comments and stuff. And there's if there's enough interest, we can maybe each of us will take the reins and build
Yeah.
a tune and stuff, showing how two different people process making a base file.
Yeah, and I'm totally gay for that. If that's what people want, I'll do it as well. I'll jump on that. That'll be a lot of fun. Just so people are aware, if you put 10 tuners in a room and you tell them all to build you a bass tune for one given car, you're probably going to get 11 tunes.
That's right. Yeah, the whole point would just be to kind of like walk around the software, just as like being Foxbody or SA or just push rod 5 liter guys. Maybe you'd just want to see that perspective of maybe this is like steps you'd want to take.
Mm-hmm.
Danny's absolutely right. This is not something that I would say that you would want to replicate 100% because every car is going to be different, and maybe it'd work perfectly or maybe it wouldn't work at all for your car.
Yep.
So I think just walking through the software, like for as a Foxbody person or an SN person, maybe because there's other great sources out there for like how to tune your own vehicles, which we'll talk about here in a
Yep.
moment. But I think like maybe if you guys are interested to see how Foxbody guys and SN guys or Pushrod V8 guys, we would walk through the software to build a base file, a starting point.
Yeah. So with that, let's get into stuff. So, Anderson Ford offers a service for the bass tunes, which you just kind of elaborated on. Now, you guys don't do remote tuning, correct?
We do not.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't plan to in the near future either.
And that might just be due to the fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a full-time job. It's quite a bit.
110%.
Yeah. We don't do remote tuning as well. We will help you get your car started for a fee. We will do it's not listed on our website. It's something that we'll do for customers if they ask. And we will do a quick 90-minute walkthrough of how to install the Holly software on your computer, walk you through the software where everything's located at, build a base file, which I usually have a template I just use. And then I walk then the customer through on how to input their data. So I throw a bass tune on the laptop. Then I walk them through on how to put their injector data in, cam information for all of that, sensor data, like how to set up your coolant and air, set them for modular Ford. If they bought an external map sensor, I teach them how to scale, which we have a lot of this stuff already on our YouTube channel for all this. But we go through it personally one-on-one, and then we get them to fire the car up, and we will get them to the point where we get the car to idle on its own. And at that point, you are then meant to work with a tuner. We put a very relatively safe tune in it. You could go out and drive it without any problems or concerns. But the idea is these cars, and this will probably get us into a soapbox, they don't tune themselves. But the idea is it's here to help you get going so you can work with a tuner. And that's about what we'll do. We did do some remote tuning. We did that in the beginning, not quite the beginning. It's when, unfortunately, Leach Motorsports decided to end their tuning service. And there were some customers that still needed some help, and we helped them out. Outside of that, we don't do really any remote tuning. Now, we will tune cars we build. That's a different business. But those are ones that we will tune fully and out the door. But that's the only time we will actually do a full tune.
Yeah, in Anderson Ford Motorsport, like Danny said, we just sell base tune files only. It's a very simple process. We even give you like a little instruction guide in the email when the tune is emailed to you on what we recommend to get your car up and going with the said base tune file. but it's just a simple, inexpensive base tune. You pay for it, use your order number, go to this Google form link that's in the description, fill it out, and then we email you the tune with that basic instruction. That's as far as we take it. In regards to troubleshooting, if you're having issues, 99% of the time it's because the firmware is not updated in your ECU, and you need to go in and match that because otherwise the tune file just won't sync up properly. It'll only load like half the steps or may not load all of it at all, and you'll get an error message on your touchscreen or what have you. So I actually made a video about that, specifically since the Gen 2 kits, you cannot scale anything properly with the wizards. You have to build yourself a tune through the software. There's just no way around that. So that's why that video was posted. But in regards to tuning, we only offer base tune files, and that's it. Um, we did consider doing remote tuning, and like Danny said, it is a full time job, and we had plans to really expand the business this year, and it's I don't want to say it's gone backwards. It just hasn't come to fruition. And again, Anderson Ford is a Ford dealership, so my little area doesn't always necessarily take precedent over other departments. So we just had to take a step back, and then with the amount of time and effort, we'd probably end up losing money. And when you're a business, you can't lose money,
No.
especially a small business. If you're operating in the red, your doors are going to close. And so if we were to take that on, being as that there's only one person on staff for my department, that's me. We used to have more. I'm just saying that now. And the OEM parts side of things, there's only one staff member, and we just back up each other. So we can't afford to have a guy sitting in the dyno shop for 8 hours a day and then also run the actual parts business side at the same time. It just can't happen. So, yeah, remote tuning, it's not in the cards. Live tuning, if it's a car that we build,
Okay.
then yes, we'll tune it.
I was getting ready to ask.
For example, yeah, the Fox body that Danny saw, the really nice notchback that we're doing the motor swap on, and yes, we're going to tune that vehicle, and maybe Danny will be a part of that too because he'll be there and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But vehicles like that that come in, we do work to it. We install stuff on it. We install Holly kits on it. Yes, we'll tune those. But yeah, just for um, tuning can be it's a double-edged sword, right? It could be extremely rewarding, or it could be extremely what's the best word for it? Aggravating.
Yeah.
It's something a 2-hour job that you think that okay, we should be able to dial this in a couple hours, cool off sessions and stuff like that, and it'll be good to go. But people got to remember if people want us to dial in cold starts, how many times does your car get fully cold? Once, twice a day,
Once.
and you only get really one crack at it.
Yep.
And so if it's not dialed in, you may have the car a whole week. And you got to be fair with the customer too. You don't want to charge them $150 an hour for 8 straight days because you got to you're dialing in this car. So we have to be realistic, and it's just not in the cards for us. I know that's a long-winded answer for why we're not doing, but I think sometimes people just say, "Well, why can't you do it?" Well, that's why. So I'm gonna leave it at that. We have no plans to do remote tuning unless we increase staff and have a dedicated person.
Yeah, I knew you guys did. I knew you guys had a dyno. Obviously, I mean, it's in a bunch of your videos, but I wasn't quite sure if you guys did off the street tuning or if it was just cars you did, kind of similar to like what we do. So
yeah, we're not really doing off the street tuning anymore right now.
Okay.
It's just it takes too much time. Again, if we had like a dedicated, like back in the day, for example, people might know the name Danny Biggs.
Yeah.
Danny Biggs was a tuner for Anderson Ford Motorsport. Back in like in early NMRA days and stuff when PMS was huge and stuff, Danny and Rick were dedicated for it, right?
Yeah.
They could have someone on the dyno for half a day while someone ran shop. So it's just not in the cards for us. We have the dyno, and the nice thing about the dyno is that we can still test things, right? We
Yeah.
can still verify things are functioning the way that they should. That cars are making the horsepower that they should. And like when I did Project Everyman, for example, you know, people always have a high horsepower expectation and stuff. My goal was to make 450 horsepower with it, and confirmed that it did. That means we know that's what it should be doing. So that's kind of what the dyno's really used for anymore. And of course, like if there's any new products and stuff, and they claim to make horsepower, we can put that to the test. We call our dyno the Heartbreaker dyno because
Yeah.
it's not one that we can fudge the numbers. And someone's making 800 horsepower on 10 pounds of boost. I'm sorry. We throw all the BS out the window. We put the
Yeah.
proper scaling and proper SAE corrections and stuff in there. You know, our dyno's not one that you're going to break records with horsepower. It's just the way it is and stuff. But we like having true numbers, so that's what we use the dyno for mostly right now. I'm not saying that we won't reopen it for like custom tuning in the future for multiple vehicles, but just again,
Yeah. Right now.
time, effort, money, staff. It's
Yeah.
just not in the cards for us.
Well, and I get that. Like it's fun to it's fun to do. Like, don't get me wrong. I enjoy tuning. I enjoy definitely doing dyno tuning. The reason why we kind of got away from doing off the street tunings because you just don't know the combination. You don't know how it was put together. You know nothing about it, and you strap it down. You try to make a base pull, and throw a rod out the side because who knows, right? Because you don't know anything about it. So that's why we
Right.
decided, if we build it and it's all been in our house and our wheelhouse the entire time, we put it on the dyno and we started getting things prepped. Uh, if it
And you have
breaks,
receipts. Yeah.
if it breaks, I can call any of one of the manufacturers that we bought all the parts from and be like, hey, here's what happened. And 9 times out of 10, I don't have any questions. They just ship me the parts. They make it right. Uh, we've only had one failure, and that was a rod that just had a crack in it. It had a fractured crack. You couldn't see it, but it did break, and they took care of everything. And I mean, that was during COVID, and they had something back to us within like the whole short block. They came and picked it up,
Wow.
and we had it back within 72 hours, which was amazing.
Holy moly.
So, but because we knew everything, we had all the data for everything. They couldn't argue it. So,
Right.
that's why we don't do it.
So for
Right now.
people that want to tune their own vehicles versus taking it somewhere, do we think we should move on to another subject that we've both been talking about?
Sure. Yeah. If you're going with Tune the Trilogy, which I think you are,
Yes.
we're going to give a shout out to Joe Simpson. He'll probably never hear this, see this, or anything, and that's okay because it's not paid. Myself and Donnie are both members of Tune the Trilogy. Joe does a really good job of his training. I took it just because I wanted to see how his mindset worked on it. I found his videos on YouTube a while back, and I think I died laughing more times than I can count. And I've had some great conversations with him since. But I'm like, I want to see how he does his tuning. And I've actually taken other tuning courses from other tuners just to get, because you don't know everything. And so I've joined in on that. I've done others, and I highly recommend it. If you're wanting to learn how to tune, the price has gone up. I mean, we got in really early for the introductory rate for starting out. There's 120-ish videos. He goes from the beginning of installing the software up until I think he's doing
Hey,
boost
Danny,
control.
do you want to tell them exactly what Tune the Trilogy is?
You can do it.
Okay. It's essentially a training course for Holly EFI.
There we go.
That covers the entire spectrum of Holly EFI, all their ECUs, pretty much a whole library of video content.
Yep.
It's not like a syllabus with like written words. It's actually video that Joe does, breaking down individual sections of different softwares
Yep.
and reasoning behind it and stuff like that in video form. That's essentially high level what it is.
Yeah, and it's really well done. He's doing boost control now, if I remember right. And I think I just saw that he is adding a second course in there now to do the live tuning. So it sounds like for anybody that hasn't taken it, he bought a Porsche. Is it a 911?
I think
Regardless,
so. I think it's an early one. Yeah.
yeah. Regardless, it's LS swapped, which makes it better. It would have been better with Ford, but you know, it is what it is. Regardless, he put Holly on it, and he's going to do some tuning, live tuning on this car. So you get to see how he goes through his methodology of how to tune a car. And he's starting out naturally aspirated, and then he's going to build a turbo kit for it, and then teach you how he goes through his methodology of tuning a turbo car. Yeah, for the cost of the course, you can't beat it for what he's doing. He goes through the 120 videos that are already out there now. He goes through every individual piece of the software and explains exactly what it does. And he's explaining the theory behind it in that. Now, with the live stuff, you're going to see theory and then you're going to see practice. And that's the important piece. Everything you build in your tune is theory. It's theoretically going to run this way. You put it in the car, and the car's going to tell you, no. And then you're going to learn and practice to fix it. The more cars you do, the more you start to realize, okay, this is what I need to do. And you're going to get to see that through what he does. And we might do some stuff as well. We might collaborate and do a few things as well on that to be more forward focused. But once you start working on spark tables and fuel tables and things of that nature, the engine itself doesn't matter. So
That's right.
but yeah, Tune Turbo. I mean, go sign up. I mean, for the cost, it's worth every penny. And if you join now, or continue to join, like right now, and this was where we recorded this, late October 2023. Uh, my understanding is if he adds more courses, you don't have to pay for them. So he's still doing that process right now to where if you buy now, anything that's new, you will continue to get. I don't know if that'll change, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Absolutely. And also, if you're just wanting to learn more about the system itself, you know, like Danny mentioned and stuff, he's already taken other courses and stuff like that. I learned how Holly, if I worked through Rick Anderson,
Yep.
because he's my Holly rep, but I just wanted to learn more. Like I tuned before I even knew who Joe Simpson was or Tempest Racing. I already had this cartoon behind me, so I just wanted to learn more because again, you might come across different combinations and stuff, or you just want to be interested in how to tune vehicles in general. Maybe my way that I did this car isn't the right way,
Yep.
or there may be other ways, it may not be right or wrong, right? So if you just want to learn more information, especially if you don't have access to a tuner, say you can't find someone to remote tune your project, or you have nowhere nearby without trailing your car 20 hours to take it to a shop to actually get it professionally tuned, and you really want to dive into it yourself, it's just one of those great resources out there.
Yep.
And the format I really like on his is how he broke it down.
Yeah.
So you can learn at your own pace. So, say, for example, you know the basics, right? But you want to know how to really work with the acceleration enrichment or how to work with the startup enrichment. Stuff like that, where you want to kind of maybe lean or richen up how your car starts under cold conditions, warm conditions. You can learn at your own pace, and he's got it broken down by a bunch of different subsections, which makes it really easy to follow. So
Yep.
if you don't want to learn about the basics because you already know that, you can go to the section that you're most interested in. And like Danny said, you get in, he adds more videos and stuff. You don't need to pay like a monthly subscription fee, at least as of right now, as we're recording this. It just, when he adds more stuff, you have access to it, learn away. So I think it's just one of those things where the more knowledge you gain, the better off you're going to be, just in regards to overall practice.
Yep.
So I highly recommend that course. I don't know about any of the others. I've never looked into them, like Devin Vanderhoofs or any of those other guys. I'm sure they're excellent.
Yep.
Danny, you may be able to chime in on that if you've worked with them before. But I just say as a good one for the high level Holly EFI across all of them. It's not Ford specific. That's another thing to mention.
Yeah.
It's Holly EFI specific.
Yep.
So if you want to learn more about Holly EFI in general, then I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Devin's tuning class, I do have that on my list of things to do. He's got a tier 1 and tier 2 class. I've been wanting to hit that up. I haven't had a chance yet. Every time he's had the class available, it just doesn't work out time frame wise. I know his is more focused on racing. Then he's also got the up arrow class, which I'm debating on doing. I don't do a ton with the methanol. I've only done one or two. So I still think I might go take it just to get the knowledge because there's something there to be learned. I do really want to do the Holly Gauntlet. I haven't done it yet. It's their week course of all the tiers in 1 week. I think it starts on a Monday and ends on a Saturday. So,
oh jeez,
yeah, it's done in Bowling Green, which is like a 4.5 hour drive from here. So, I think the last one's already sold out. I'm waiting for the 2024 event list to come out, and I definitely want to try to hit that next year. It's on my list of things to do. I just again, like you learn, like you kind of mentioned something that I'm gonna argue against. When you're going through Tune the Trilogy and he's going through the basic stuff, you might know it. I would still watch because I thought I knew where everything was, and then he showed me. I can't remember what it was, but it was in the HP Dominator. There was a setting I was looking for once, and I just never could find it, and he was going through it, and I found it, and I was like, "This is stupid." Kind of wish the software was the same across all of them.
Yeah, right. You don't know what you don't know, right? So if you think you know something, it may be worth it just to watch it over again. Absolutely, I don't deny that fact at all.
Yeah. So, outside of that, do you want to go over what happened at the end of September with Holly? Well, I think it was the end of September, early October. The inevitable.
Sure, and I don't think this is going to shock anyone, especially if you've been alive the last 2 years in the United States of America. Just putting that out there. But Holly had a price increase. Holly EFI components, and we've been seeing this more and more lately, right? The supply chain interruptions, cost of materials, sourcing materials and stuff. You know, getting stuff for cheap anymore is getting really hard. So Holly EFI stuff just went up in price, and stuff's never getting cheaper, right?
No,
it's always getting more expensive. So just I wanted to make mention of that because people may complain that this isn't like 3 or 4 years ago, right? Where you could get a Holly EFI kit for $1,300.
Yeah, because I bought the 943F kit. It was the Terminator X Max kit for Fox bodies. I bought that for myself because I wanted the X Max, and I was going to use. I gotta get used to this. I wanted to use my adapter on my car, on one of my cars, and it was still cheaper for me back then to buy a kit and a complete kit than it was to buy the ECU and the screen, because the ECU and the screen cost just the same amount as, because I think the ECU was like the max back then was like $700 and some dollars, and the screen was still like $300. So you were at $1,000 plus then you had the wideband and the power harness to it, which is another $200-300. You're over the cost.
Yep.
So they're basically giving you a wiring harness for free if you really look at it from that perspective. So it's like I just bought the kit, and those days are gone, folks. It's going to break my heart because, you know, we haven't officially announced it, kind of am now, but we're going to be having a price increase at the first of the year. We don't have a choice. We should have done it basically at the beginning of this year, but we held out for the community as long as we could because prices of the circuit boards has gone way up. The components that go on it have gone way up. It's always a bidding war still for components. And when I'm ordering stuff like Um, like Holly connectors, they're the the TE connector, but we call them Holly connectors because that's what everybody knows them as. Um, I'm a small company and I'm trying to bid against Holly for pricing. Who do you think's going to lose? It's this guy because I'm not ordering hundreds of thousands of those. I'm ordering them in quantities of hundreds, and we can't compete. So, unfortunately, we just can't get the super cheap pricing that everybody else can. So, unfortunately, we will be doing a price increase for sure. I don't know what that looks like yet. We're going to try to keep it as minimal as possible, but we don't have a choice because, like Donnie said, any small businesses running in the red don't last, and
That's right.
we can't keep it at the process we're going. We are bringing new products out. Some we haven't announced, but we are working on those to help and to help offset. Yep, and Donnie's excited about a few of them.
That's right.
So he got to see a preview of one before this. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there on the price increase so people realize it's everybody, and it hurts. And there's a lot of companies, I don't know about Holly, but I know us. We held out as long as we possibly could before we pass it on. Like we've ate
Yeah.
the cost. And that hurts. But we had the opportunity to be able to do it safely and still support the community and stay afloat. But that wouldn't last if we did it for another year. So it hurts. It really does. But got to do what you got to do for sure.
That's right. And it's affected. Everyone could see this, right?
Yeah.
It's price of fuel, price of anything right now is way more expensive. It's not like just the performance parts industry has gone up in price. It's everything. So it only makes sense that any business that's wanting to stay in business, they're going to increase their prices to keep up so they can keep their profit margin high enough to sustain staff and sustain the business staying open. Another example on this, just kind of off subject real quick,
Yeah.
our camshafts, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, our camshafts this year, for the longest time, people probably know this. It's not as bad now, but it was last year. We didn't have any camshafts on the shelf. I had nothing for about almost 6 months. I had no product for 6 months. I was selling promises, is what I was
Yep.
doing. Well, it turns out that the the place where everyone, it wasn't just us. Most places get their cores from the same place overseas.
Yep.
I don't think that's really much of a secret.
No.
Most steel and aluminum things
Comes
that
from
come from
overseas.
overseas come from a couple places, and that's it. Well, guys, look at Comp Cam's price of camshafts right now.
Sorry.
It's over $500 for a cam. A Comp Cam's cam is $522. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
So I don't know how TrickFlow gets away with it. Maybe they had enough stock because their cams are still like now Ford Performance is a whole nother deal. Which one of these days I'm going to get on a soapbox about Ford Performance. Anyway, TrickFlow. I don't know how they did it. I'm guessing they had enough like cores just laying around that maybe weren't ground yet or something. But they've been able to keep their prices pretty darn low. Kudos to them. I can't believe it. But when we had to buy cores for our cams, I'm telling you, like I can't remember. I actually calculated how much of an increase it was. I can't remember what it was now, but guys, it was over 50% of an increase in the core charge. That wasn't even the price to have it manufactured.
That's the price of the core.
Ground, CNC'd. It was just the price of the core. So, of course, our cams now, as of right now, of course, prices can change because I was told cores are getting short again. Of course, coming into the holiday season, it's never fun. But again, just another example, like Danny was saying, cost of materials, cost of getting stuff done, super through the roof. And not just Holly, like, again, steel cam cores. What can you do? In the original place where we got them from, we didn't buy from them anymore because we had a purchase order with them this is some insider baseball. It may mean something to you, may not. I don't know. But I just want to have this tirade a little bit in regards to pricing. We had to buy from a different supplier. And my guess is the same supplier that Comp got their stuff from. Because after looking at what their prices went to, and we had to do a massive increase as well, it only makes sense. Again, I don't know anyone at Edelbrock that owns Comp. I don't know anyone over there, so I can't confirm that. But it just happens to make sense to me. If you follow the money, if
Yep.
their prices go way up, if their cams were 300, now they're 500, something had to give there. But we had to end up buying cores from somewhere completely different. And people probably noticed the boxes, so some of our cams may be a little different from what they're used to. Anyway, insider baseball stuff, but yeah, we just had to, in order to have product, because again, I didn't have product for almost 6 months. And at some point, people are going to, call in to claim their ticket for what they paid for. So we had to bite the bullet, pay the extra. For the guys that, pre-ordered, we took in the cost. We may have lost money on some of the early people, but that's okay. They got their product and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's just how business can go sometimes. But you got to be able to keep up, because if we would have kept our cams cheap and kept losing money on those cams, I don't know if Anderson Ford Motorsport would still be around, to be honest with you. The amount of camshaft cores we purchased
Oh yeah.
earlier this year is like almost sickening.
Oh yeah.
How much money we spent in just that.
Well, it's you're talking camcorders. I mean, absolutely. Like I mean, we see it on our stuff, and our stuff's tiny. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just
Yeah.
tiny little components. I mean, some of this stuff's not even it's the size of a grain, and like some of the stuff we buy and went up 50 to 100% just this year, and I'm just sitting there thinking, why? But it's the other downfall of being small business. You can't compete when it comes down to other companies ordering hundreds of thousands of these parts, like comp cams. Or I think the insider part for Trick Flow is, if I remember right, they did a lot of that even core building in house now, if I
Probably.
remember right. Because when they started doing, because they used to do their intakes, they used to outsource the intakes to be made, and they brought that
Mm-hmm.
in house 5 years ago, maybe longer. Um,
Yeah, they're redoing a lot of their
core
EFI
molds,
EFI lowers right now
yeah.
at their foundry. Yeah.
So I think that's how they are able to do it. But that was probably a massive purchase cost to be able to even
Oh God.
to do
I'm
that,
sure.
right? But it
I'm
might have
sure.
paid
Yeah.
off for them. Like I about had a heart attack this summer because I wanted to buy an aluminum Ford Motorsport drive shaft. I remember you used to pick those things up for $199, and the place quoted me $649, and I walked away. I went and found me an Aerostar van in the junkyard and had it cut to size because they're aluminum. like,
Right.
like not doing this. Um,
Yeah.
and that might be a fun topic we could get into one day too. Is just some of the old school hack tricks to get performance parts that people may not think about anymore, like the Aerostar, 4-wheel drive vans had aluminum drive shafts that you could then just cut and work. And some of them actually did work straight out of the box, depending on the year you could find.
Okay.
But that'd be fun.
Disclosure, I don't know a lot about that stuff. A lot of that stuff I actually learned about from Dan over at Neo Mustangs.
Okay.
Because when I came into this hobby, a little more of a backstory. When I came into this hobby, you know, I really didn't look into upgrading my cars as
Yep.
much, as more as just have something that was already done. Building cars and like modifying them didn't come to by my mid to late 20s,
Okay.
and that's actually when I probably started YouTube, because that's when I started taking this car through its restoration process, putting a motor in it, wire tucking, all that stuff. But like before then, it was just like I just want a car that I can get in and drive. I don't want to have to mess with it, or if I'm going to mess with it, I got to know people that know how to mess with it, so I can learn from them. So full disclosure, I didn't come into this
Oh, that's
like
fine.
knowing all the tricks, right?
But
I didn't know about the SN95 spindle upgrade until I was looking to do a 5 lug swap on this, and I wanted Cobra brakes.
okay.
So Again, that was several years ago and stuff. So I've learned a lot over the.
Okay.
You know, I'm
Oh
not a
yeah.
slouch, but I don't know everything. So like a trick like that, like you just mentioned, I had no idea that Aerostar had aluminum drive shafts that you
Yep.
could modify to make work.
Yep.
No idea. So I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm learning more.
Well, and I'll get into a little bit of because we got plenty of time. I'm not in a hurry. One of the fun tricks and history of stuff I used to do was um, before I moved to Colorado years ago was I used to do V8 swaps in SN95s. I used to do take. I ran a business where you would drop off your 94 to 95 Mustang V6. You would drop it off at 8 in the morning, and when you got off work at 5 in the afternoon, it was done. And I
Huh.
worked out a deal with the local salvage yards to buy engines out of 91 to 93 Thunderbirds with the 5 liter. Well, with some, and this is, early 2000s. So, there was no real internet searching for this stuff. I had a local Ford dealership that was, uh, they love that kind of stuff. And they basically gave me access to the Ford EVTM stuff, software. I would go in, they would sign me in, and I would just go to town through the software. And I found out that 91 to 93 T-Birds was the uh, beta test car for the 94 95 engine, which was the lower
Oh,
intake
okay.
height. So
Okay, yeah.
from intake to pan, it was a 94 to 95 GT engine, even cam, all of it. The only difference was the throttle body was the same throttle body used on the Super Coupes,
Okay.
and the passenger side accessory bracket was slightly different. It used a different alternator. And what we would do is we were able to luckily source the correct GT alternator brackets for a good cost through Ford, and we would swap them. Or if someone didn't, or someone was on a real budget, we would just keep the T-Bird or Thunderbird bracket and alternator and just run it. You just had to remember that's the alternator you had to buy. It worked fine. It was still a 3G alternator, so it worked perfect.
Right. Okay.
And then I was able just to source the harnesses, and the 94 95s were what was called max wired. So your V6s had fog lamp connectors already in the bumper. It had the switch connectors underneath the console. All you had to do was add a fuse and a relay, and the fog lamps. You had fog lamps, so you didn't have to change out the whole harnesses in the car. All you had to do was change out the ECU harness, the ECU. You could reuse the transmission harness and just remove the oxygen sensors and your engine harness. Swap them out, you were done. The radiators were the same. The fan technically was the same. The difference was the CCRM. The CCRM only had the high speed fan, where the GT had low speed and high speed. The fan was still a
Okay.
2 speed fan, it was just used as a single speed. So we had that down to a science. And the thing was, is you kept your 5 speed transmission or an automatic. Like we didn't swap out transmissions unless requested. And then I had a wrecking yard up in Detroit that would keep T-Bird rear ends. So they would keep rear ends on
Okay.
turbo coupes. And I would pick them up for, without axles, it was like $150. Well,
Oh, jeez.
those already came with 355 and 373 gears. And what a
Right.
lot of people don't realize is the 7.5 uses the same axles, same brakes, and everything as the GT. So we would just bring the housings home, clean up the diff if the diff needed cleaned, or the rear end, pull the traction
Hmm.
control, traction lock out of it, rebuild it if needed. We would inspect them, assemble it with all the 7.5 internal components needed, axles, brake plates, everything. Put the brakes on it, and you would have a 8.8 going into your swap car for maybe $200 in parts. The rebuild kit. God love the prices back in 2000, and we could do that whole swap in just
Yeah.
less than an 8-hour day. And
Jeez.
yeah, those were the neat things back then. Was you learned all these little nuances that you could go out and get parts from. Even the 0304 Cobra guys found out that the later T-Bird independent rear suspensions was actually a better housing. And
I did know that one actually for an odd reason. I know that one.
Okay, and I think you can actually use one out of an expedition as well, or it was the excursion or explorer. It was one of them that had the independent in it that you could actually use that one too. But the one that was coveted was out of the
T-Bird.
T-Bird.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you were looking for Fox bodies, looking for going down a rabbit hole, but I'll quit soon. If you wanted to do like a 31 spline axle upgrade on the cheap, you would get 2 Ranger axles. I think it was the passenger side axles or the driver side. It was one of the sides was the same length needed to upgrade to 31 spline. And then you could get the differential, the locker out of an F-150.
Like an Explorer or Expedition or something, yeah.
Yeah, F-150 truck, anything like that. And
Yeah.
there you go. You had a 31 spline diff, axles, right length, put them in, and you could probably do it for a couple $100. You can't even get a differential today for that.
That's true. And just full disclosure, everybody, just to make sure people don't think that I'm a complete fucking idiot. I'm 37, so like when I didn't know a lot of stuff, it was in my mid to early 20s. Again, when I was just buying cars that were already done, or I didn't really want to work on them. So I've learned a lot since then. Okay, I'm not like still in my 20s. I'm starting to peak towards my 40s now. So
Eek.
I've learned a lot, and I think that shows now. But I just wanted to put that out there that this isn't something I just learned, last night, stuff like that. It's just my gradual path of learning about modifying cars and all these tips and tricks. I still don't know all of them, but I've learned through other people.
Yep.
And credit where credit's due. Dan at Neo Mustangs, I like to call him the junkyard king sometimes because he'd always bring up that budget stuff, and that's never really been a thing that I've done. So more power to people that need to stick to a strict budget and stuff like that. Those tricks do exist.
Oh yeah,
and stuff along those lines. So I don't knock him for any of that. It's just I just personally never really wanted to look into it because I've always looked into other avenues.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're also coming in at a different time range too, right? So, like in the early 2000s, you weren't going out and buying, especially if you were in high school, you weren't going out and buying aluminum heads. You weren't going out and buying an intake. What you were doing is you were going to the salvage yard, finding an Explorer, and just yanking everything you could.
GT40 iron heads. Yep, I did that in my 88.
That was a common upgrade, but it wasn't really in the early 2000s. It wasn't big. Like people weren't really talking about it because the Explorers didn't come out until '96. So you're only talking 4 years, right? Between when that came out with the 5-liter and when I started doing that stuff, that's 4 years. So it wasn't a widely known thing because it wasn't like you were going on Facebook or Twitter or whatever the hell you want to use and find that. You were going to forums, hoping you found the post with the right search, and you had internet. For anybody that's watching this that's younger, there was a time before the internet, and that was you figured it out on your own.
That's right.
So,
or you relied on other people, other mechanics and stuff,
small speed shops,
absorbed their knowledge and stuff like that. One of my best friends, auto mechanic, but he's been big into the Mustang game for a long time, and I learned a lot from him too. So, absolutely.
I have this weird desire to do an old E7 build. I want to do like what they used to do, the old.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Sealed engine builds back in the day. The stock race, just stock engine builds where you're limited on the camshaft, but you had to still run the stock style head. Where people would just port the living crap out of them. Stock intakes, and I think something like that would be fun to do. Just see what you can do today with a modern EFI. I mean, these people were running really good ETs on stock ECUs with limited tuning
Right.
capabilities. I would be kind of curious to do another one of those builds. I'm tempted to do it. I might hate myself after doing it, but what else is new?
Sure. And you know what's kind of funny? Out of like all the horsepower wars and stuff like that are going on currently, with like stock Mustangs coming with 500 horsepower from the factory, a lot of people are going back to those older builds where it's like, hey, I want to do an old GT40 headed
Yep.
E303 tubular GT40 or Explorer intake manifold. Yes, it's only going to make 240 rear wheel horsepower, but putting it in a light car, it's still a lot of fun to drive and stuff. So I understand it. Um, it's just not that's just not my thing, honestly. Like
Yeah.
once I went aluminum heads and with a good cam and stuff, I'm never going back.
It's tough.
Um, yeah, I mean,
It is.
if anything, I'll be spending more and more money here in the near future because I want something where I could boost the living crap out of it and spin it to 7,000 RPM. But that's just me. But I've been seeing that more and more lately. People that have been calling me and saying, "Hey, I need a cam for stock heads with upgraded valve springs, maybe a set of aftermarket flat top pistons, but they have E7s or GT40 iron heads on it." And I always ask them, "Do you plan on upgrading the heads?" Said, "Nope, I want to keep it this way. I just want a good cam for it."
Nope.
So I've been noticing more and more of that lately. I don't know if it's just because people are like feeling nostalgic lately, maybe, or just don't want to spend. Of course, cylinder heads are expensive again too, except for the AFR enforcers. Those are still relatively cheap, surprisingly. But I think people are just feeling more nostalgic lately and like really wanting to just take some GT40 irons and seeing what they could do with them. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it could be a nostalgic thing. Like I'm wanting to do it definitely for the nostalgic thing because I did some of the stock engine stuff back
Hmm.
way too long ago. Um, but it's also during this time it's readily available. Like you can go on Facebook Marketplace and pick that up today versus you might want a set of twisted wedge heads. You might wait 2-3 months depending on if anybody has them in stock and cost, right?
I do.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. Um,
But you're right though. It's very inconsistent. Like we have stock now, but next week we may be out.
yeah, because I mean there was probably times you couldn't get superchargers.
Yep.
But then you have people like me who won't run a Vortec. I I run the Novi 2000 on my SNs. I think it's the better blower. It wasn't built very long, so I have a stockpile of them. When I find them for sale for cheap, I buy them. I don't need it. I buy them because I know eventually I'm going to have another one and I'm going to put that blower on it. And it's a better setup. It's better brackets. They put the alternator down below where it belonged. It's not all smashed in there like the Vortec. But
I do agree with that.
yeah,
I don't know why Vortec did that with the SN.
it,
And it looks really funky in there that way too. I don't know. It just anyway.
yep,
Sorry.
nope, and
Continue.
yep, it's some stuff like that. And now people are starting to realize. Well, people back in the day realized the Paxton was better when you were
Mhm.
doing the S trim because they were the same cost. You could get the S trim Vortec and the Novi 2000 kit, and they were within a few $100s of each other. But yet, the S trim would never keep up with the Novi 2000. The Novi 2000 was more of a in between T and YS, more YS
Yeah.
on that on
A
on
little
the
bit bigger
originals.
in
For
that
anybody
stuff.
watching the originals, which is the ones I have, below 50,000 serial number, made by the original Paxton family group, um, those flowed within a few thousand CFM of a YSI. They were geared different, and they just sound mean going down the road. Like they whine. It sounds like you're in a Cessna, and I grew up with that stuff, and I love that stuff. And yeah, it's fun stuff.
Maybe that'll be another episode. We start talking about all those nostalgic builds and stuff, or stuff that we wish that you could get again new, or something like that. Maybe that'd be fun to talk about.
So I've actually am working. This won't be an MF Customs part. Um, I'm working with a company to remake the Paxton brackets.
Ooh.
We've already did the discharge tube. We are making a power pipe. Sorry, you guys didn't support one, but we're
Mhm.
making our own version of it. It's not really a power pipe. The 9495 kit, and for anybody listening or watching, I'm more of an SN guy than a Fox. Um, the Paxton kit on the 9495s never had to go through the fender. Like how if you did a power pipe with Anderson's, you have to go put a hole in the fender and run it through. There was, because of the way it's set up, you can actually make a full 180 in 4
Mhm.
inch and go all the way back up to the original air filter inlet area and run it out. So I've worked with a company to remake those. Grant Paxton sent you like some dryer vent crap. Um,
Gotta love that stuff.
yeah, but the one thing that you just can't find is the brackets, and the company that I'm working with, they're going to cut them for me. Um, we're going to start making those because you can still buy the head unit.
Oh yeah.
So once you have the head unit, you just need the brackets and stuff. And since we can, and they're not cast, they were water jet cut originally, so we're just following the same process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I I just think it was a better kit, so I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to try. Probably get yelled at by
Right.
Vortec. Vortec, if you see this,
Um.
don't call me.
Well, here's an interesting subject about that because we're coming out with the 351 Windsor swap bracket
Yep.
to work with the Vortex stuff, and we talked to Vortec about it because we thought it might possibly be an issue. We wanted to check with them first, essentially, and then what we worked out was that they wouldn't have a problem with it because we're still buying components from them to complete kits. Because essentially, there's still a couple things we need to buy from them to modify.
Okay.
But the main piece, the back bracket that's normally cast for the Vortec kits, they're not going to be cast. They're
No.
going to be steel. They're going to be probably powder coated too to make them look pretty. But they're going to be have all the proper holes lined up to where it keeps the blower in the same position as a 302, so it's low enough to clear a hood, where it's not like where people bolt them to the 3 bolts in the hood and not the
Yep.
block, so it shifts it up too high, and usually you have to run a big cow hood to clear it,
Yep.
or cut a hole in your hood, which looks stupid. So we're going to set it up to where it's going to line up in all the holes, but it's going to line up based on the hole on the block. So asymmetry wise, it's the same as the 302, where it keeps it low enough to be able to clear the
Okay.
hood and stuff like that. But we talked to Vortec about that. They don't have a problem with it, especially since we're still going to be buying components from them to modify to make it a complete kit.
Yeah, and that'll be the interesting piece on my side, right? Because I don't know what from them. The only thing we would be buying would be head units. So we'll,
I
we'll
don't foresee there being an issue unless you say it's a Paxton official part.
yeah,
You just have to give it probably like your own part number
which
and
we'll
stuff
do.
like that. I don't foresee there being an issue.
Yeah, I don't either, but it's one of those things you just never know. And since Vortec bought Paxton, I figured they probably wouldn't say anything. But
Yeah, and now Paxton's own Vortec Paxton are owned by I forgot the name of the group, but AFR,
yeah,
um, AFR, Scat. Um, there's another one, but yeah, they're a big conglomerate now. Unfortunately,
they're like another Holly. Holly's been buying up a bunch of different
yes,
companies, and that could be another tirade I could go into. I get why they're doing it, but at the same time, I think it hurts more than it does help.
yeah, that'd probably be a topic for another video because we could really go into
Yeah.
that.
Um.
Is there anything else we wanted to?
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
we covered a decent amount, and we went to pretty good detail on some stuff. So
we did. I mean, we're only at an hour and 20. Surprisingly. Um.
I think the flow was much better on this one. What do you think?
Yeah. For anybody who wants to know, we did one of these other ones, and we had some audio issues, so we kind of canned it. I do want to get into one thing. Let's get back into Holly, and
Okay.
I'll try to keep us on pace to not be on here for 3 hours on that. What's your thoughts on Holly's self tuning? Go.
Holley self tuning doesn't exist.
All right. Yep.
What does what does exist is self adjustments for fueling based on your air fuel ratio table, and that's about it. But which is a great function,
Yes.
especially if you have everything set up properly. But the notion of being self tuning got way either overstated or understated from Holly. Good on them. It was probably a great marketing ploy.
Yep.
But we got to call a spade here. It is not self tuning, never has been, never will be.
Yeah. So that is something that I don't know if you get a bunch of calls on. We do from time to time. We probably get at least 6 a month, maybe more, asking how the self tuning works. Like, how does it do the timing tables? How does it do all that? And I said, well, when it does timing, if you read the manual, it tells you to take the ECU out of the car. You got to point the LEDs at the spark plugs when you pull it so it can read the plugs. And then the person kind of gets a little upset with me. Then I have to explain to them that's the only way you're going to do it. You have to go look at that stuff. The ECU doesn't know any better. And then I think a light bulb turns on. They're like, or an LED. We are in 2023. The LED turns on. And they realize, oh. And I explained to them, I'm like, and the same goes for fuel. If you put 16.0 in your entire air to fuel ratio table, guess what it's going to shoot for? 16.0. It doesn't have a safety in there going, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this. It's going to say, hey, this is what this guy wants. Let's go for it. And it's going to do it.
Yep.
You might be calling Donnie up for some parts after that, but it'll do it for a little bit. So it does take some knowledge of what you need to do. And that goes back to like the Tune to Trilogy or any shop that's willing to teach you how to tune, or a tuner if you can find one. It's important to have
more
that.
more requires specific user input.
Yes.
I guess is probably a proper way to say it, because I think where people got the self tuning thing from was the handheld, right? Because you have to go through the wizard and answer a few questions, and all of a sudden you got a tune in the car.
I don't know if it's that or because they labeled a table learn, the learn table.
Fair.
I've always, and I'm going to steal this from Matt over at Sloppy Mechanics. Don't get mad at me. He calls it the Game Boy tune. That's all that handheld's good for. You go beep bop beep bop. Sorry, Matt. I probably ruined that. But that's all that really was, right? I think it comes, me personally, I think it comes from the learn. What's interesting for me for Holly is, the Dominator and the HPs have been out for ever and a day. Never been upgraded. Most standalone ECUs today still can't touch the functions of a Dominator. You just can't beat it. And when we have customers coming in going, hey, I want to buy a Terminator X and I want to buy the CAN to IO module and I want to do this and that, the first thing I say is buy a Dominator. It's not to upsell. It's I know where they're going. And you find out how quickly the CAN IO module has its limitations. I'm not dissing the CAN IO module. It's perfect for some of its use cases, and I've done some fun stuff with it. But you don't put anything on it that is what we would call life-saving for a car. If you wouldn't want to put, when I say life-saving, this is more into the drag racing stuff, but you wouldn't want to put dome pressure on it. You wouldn't want to put your boost solenoids on it, which you can't anyways, because if you use any of the canned IO or the ICF stuff, you have to put those on the main ECU anyways. You won't allow you to put those on CAN. So it's got its limitations, but it is a neat box. So when a lot of the turbo guys come in and they want to go, if it's not a street car, but it's more of a race car, some street cars, and they start talking about all the things they want to do, like they want dome pressure control, CO2, traction control, they're wanting all these options. I put on the quote Terminator X, and we just get them a Dominator. Like we have it all figured into our labor hours and everything. And it's funny that they don't complain because they get a Dominator for the same cost, but we've already figured it all in. But if we didn't do
Hmm.
that and we showed them the Dominator cost, they would throw a huge fit. Yes, it's more expensive, but you get like a bazillion different inputs and outputs, and the functionality of it is much bigger.
Right.
You
Still
don't,
not self tuning.
yeah, it's not self tuning yet. Um, we're,
Don't get me wrong. It makes me sound kind of like vulgar against Holly, but I'm not. I'm a true believer in Holly EFI stuff. I run it on both my Fox bodies. I'm just poking a little bit of fun about the marketing side of it. Um, I'm gonna probably run Holly EFI on my Fox bodies unless some miracle thing comes out. Danny will probably invent it, and we'll go from there. And we'll call it the Gen 6 billion kit or something.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, yeah, I'm a true believer of Holly EFI, so I'm just poking fun at it, guys. Don't take it too
yeah,
seriously when I call crap out.
and we both are. Like all of them have their places. I actually fun little quick story is a buddy of mine that I've known for since I lived in Ohio, so I've known him for over 20 years. He reached out to me, got this really mint Fox out of California, beautiful car. He's like, I want to run one of your adapters. I'm like, okay, and he's a Holly guy. Unfortunately, he does have a downfall. He likes to put LSs in Foxes, so he's not all there, but he's still a good guy. Um, we were chatting, and I actually recommended a micro squirt because he wanted something that was still plug and play, and he wanted to play around with something a little different. He good with Holly, and I recommended the micro squirt, and that guy has been in heaven with it. And I'm a big fan of anything that fits the need, and the micro squirt fit his need perfectly. It's a stock engine. He's going to do almost nothing with it. He just wanted to put something better in it, and eventually he might throw like an old Novi 1000 or a Vortex supercharger on it. But it's still going to be a stock engine, heads to cam to intake, you know. So it didn't make sense to go with the Holly in that case, and I showed him what the micro square can do, and it's he's in love with it, and that's awesome. I will recommend other. You can call us and tell us your build, and I may not even recommend our adapter. I may not even recommend Holly. So it's what fits the need, and I'd rather the customer be happy than upset. I'm sure you deal
I'm
with that.
always going to recommend Holly.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
To the perspective though, like my bread and butter, how I make a living, is through selling performance parts. So I don't think like people should get upset like when I say stuff like that. But then again, it's not like I'm just selling anything under the sun. We developed the Gen 2 kit with Danny for a reason because it's tried and true and we know it works.
Yep.
Speaking of which, the reason I'm in such a good mood tonight
Uh oh.
is because today was a very good day. I took care of two issues I was having. Um, one wasn't an issue, but one was I thought I was going to have to fight taking out my old 937F harness from my 87 here because it was a harness from back early when I installed this kit in this car.
Okay.
And I got it sitting over there to box up to send to Danny because we're going to convert it to Gen 2.
Yep.
And the second thing was I was having an issue with my 93 Project Everyman, and it was getting random like surges up to 3,000 RPM. And I noticed that my TPS percentage was over one. And we talked about this in our other video in regards to setting up the IAC valve. And I bought an OEM Ford Motorcraft TPS sensor, replaced it today, and did a TPS auto set once I installed it. Actually, I had to do two because it was kind of tight going on. But I did two TPS auto sets, got it back to zero. I went and drove it. Car drove great, idled great, never surged, never tried to increase its idle on me for any reason. Good to go. brand new OEM Ford Motorcraft. So I'm in a great mood today. But I got a harness that's going to Danny. It's sitting back there, and I thought I was gonna have to fight with this thing for hours because I'm by myself, and trying to fight those plugs through that small firewall hole in the car, getting all those plugs through. I thought it was gonna be a pain in the butt, but I got lucky. They all kind of just wiggled into place, and I got them out. It only took me like a half hour. So I'm in a great mood in regards to that.
That's
But I'm gonna be
awesome.
sending that stuff off to Danny to convert to Gen 2.
Yeah.
But my original point was, um, I do make my money based on selling parts. That's how I make money.
Yeah.
All right. So full disclosure, yes, I like to recommend things that work for people, but at the same time, you know, I'm going to recommend stuff that I believe in and stuff that I sell.
And that
So
makes sense.
I don't sell micro squirts or mega squirts, but you guys get the gist.
Yeah, and I think one thing people got to realize too is you're a dealer for them as well. You are focused on that. Where us, or on our side of the house, we are agnostic to any of that. Like, we can recommend whatever we want due to the fact that we're not tied to one company. And another reason why we partnered together is Holly denied me to be a dealer. I tried.
Grumpy cat face.
I tried. But that was before we really got to know each other as well. Like, we were trying to figure out how to do the business, how to support the Holly stuff. Unfortunately, we just couldn't become a Holly dealer, and that kind of worked out too, for the best. But it also gave us the opportunity we can work with whatever vendors we want. We're working with other ECU manufacturers today to support them with our adapter. So that'll be coming in the future. Won't get into details on that, but you're going to see more options and availability, and that's always been the goal. The goal was always to get a couple of generations out of different vehicles of cars, get those out, then start working as we evolution through those to then take and go back, look at the old to make sure that we can support everything and go more universal to where at that point our adapter is no longer a Holly adapter. It's an adapter, and then it's just our main harness that is what determines what ECU it works on. So, and that's the route
Makes
we're
sense.
going. So it'll be
and just real quick on that last point there in regards to, I do recommend Holly Terminator X stuff, the Gen 2 kit, MF Customs kit, and stuff for most builds. Full disclosure, I'll make a video on this whenever I get one in stock, but I'm going to switch this over to HP because I want to run an NTK sensor, and Terminator X can't support that. They only support the Bosch 4.9. So I'm going to literally convert this over to an HP, which luckily all that requires for a conversion is an ECU.
Yep.
So, and of course the software is different. You have to go to a Holly like V6 or whatever it is for Holly EFI.
Yep.
And I think I can just switch firmware for the handheld.
Yes.
Danny, you might be able to confirm that for me.
Yep. So you will need
For
if
my
you got
handheld.
the 3.5 inch, you just got to switch out the handheld's firmware. Now, if you have the 5-inch, which I got from you recently, you don't have to. It actually recognizes the ECU and it does it automatically. So
Really, for HP?
Yeah. So this is why. Okay, people. So we did a 5-inch review. I bought one from Donnie probably a month ago, and I heard through the grapevine that you don't have to flash between ECUs when you're using it, and we do a bunch of testing. As you learned earlier, we did ECU repairs, and we have test benches. And what was always annoying was when we wanted to test our adapters on HP, we had to reflash the 3.5-inch screen, and then when we went back to Terminator X, we had to reflash it back. When I looked at the SD card contents, I noticed that it had folders for it was called HEFI for Holly EFI, which is what you use for the HP and Dominators, and then it had a Terminator X folder, and it both had their corresponding firmwares for those ECUs, and underneath each of those folders, it had its own global files. and its own data logging. And I started to realize it's universal. So that handheld, and we've tested it here, you can leave it powered on, never turn it off, disconnect it from a Terminator X, plug in an HP, power on the HP, and it'll go, oh, and at the top it'll say like Terminator X. And all of a sudden it'll switch and it'll say Holly EFI. So we no longer have to
Ah,
switch. And for anybody curious, the 5-inch also has one benefit, and it's not much more in cost, if I remember correctly, than the 3.5-inch. Is it's got GPS speed. So,
but yeah, the point I was making though,
yeah,
because that was a sidetrack in regards to the
sorry.
HP on my car. But perfect example of this. No, you're fine. The example I was bringing up is that yes, I sell Holly EFI stuff, and I'm a believer in it because I run it,
Yep.
and that's why I recommend it. But a good example of this is stuff that I sell, but I can't really recommend in good conscience is Pro M EFI. We do sell the Pro M EFI system,
Okay.
but if someone calls asking about it, I tell them straight up, hey, I don't know anything about it. Never installed one, never tried to tune one, and you're pretty much limited on resources altogether. I'll still sell you one, and Anderson and Pro M go way back.
Yeah.
So that's why I have no problem selling them because I like the guys over there. Sean over at Pro M, he's a cool dude, ex Navy SEAL, really cool guy. Um, but at the same time, like if someone calls in asking about the Pro M system, I'm going to steer them towards Holly because that's what I know.
Yep.
Right. So yes, I can sell Pro Am, but it's not one of those products that I can be like, oh man, I could really just sell this to you just to sell it. It's like, no, I'm gonna be like honest with you about it and be like, this is why I would choose a Terminator X Gen 2 kit, or this is why I would choose an HP kit, or this is why I would choose an MF Customs kit
Yep.
over a system like that, because again, I have that experience. So I don't want you just thinking I'm some greedy capitalist out there just trying to make a buck. It's like, no, I do like to recommend stuff that I personally
Yeah.
have tried out or know that's got resources for it.
Exactly. And you'll have that. And there's nothing wrong. One thing Holly has over all the other standalones right now that I can comfortably say is the user interface is simple to use. You're not searching for hours to find stuff. It's actually fairly straightforward. Now, the one question I have for you is if you're going HP on that car, do you have electric fans?
I do, but they're not wired into the Holly.
Okay, so you're safe. What most people don't realize is outputs 1 and 2 on the HP are 12 volt, not ground.
Not grounded? Okay.
So when people go from a Terminator X and say they have a fan or a trans fan or whatever on outputs 1 and 2, those are ground triggered on a Terminator. They don't work on the HP because you got to go switch your relay pinning around because it's 12 volt. But other than that, that's really the only difference pin wise.
Yeah, and say I just now's the time to do it just because of the other things I'm going to be doing to this car. But I really wanted to run an NTK sensor.
Yep.
Being that I'm boosted, and I think I might bite the bullet and change fuels at some point. And the Bosch 49s don't have a good track record with if you're going to be going back and forth with different fuels.
Which we're going to open up a debate. Which fuel are you thinking about going with?
E85.
Okay. I mean, if you were one of our customers, I probably wouldn't recommend going to the NTK route.
What's that?
If you were one of our, like if we were doing your build, we probably wouldn't go the NTK route if you're doing E85. And that's nothing wrong with
the NTK. NTK?
Nope. We wouldn't do the NTK. We actually probably would still run the Bosch 4.2 on that.
Bosch 4.2?
The only time we really go NTK...
Which the HP can run also.
Yep. Because you're going HP ECU is the reason why I mentioned that one. The only reason for it, and this is our personal preference, is the NTK we only use when we do methanol.
Okay.
Or you need to get into an AFR level below 10.0 on the gas scale. If you're going to stay on the gas scale, E85, even on a Terminator X, would be fine for us. That's the only time we ever look at going away from is methanol, or if you want to go below 10.0. On the, and again, I keep preference in the gas scale because there's a reason for that, because the stoic value is different between the fuels. Other than that, no. Like most of our stuff, and even one of my own, two of my own cars are flex fuel capable cars with Holly. Um, for anybody that knows any of my videos or watched any of them, I did the Holly install on a green SN. That's one of my personal cars that I'll probably be buried in. It was my first SN. I've owned that car for over 20 years. When I did that install, I actually had to revert my car. That car had a custom version of a Mega Squirt 3 on it that was running cam crank, coil on plug, the whole gambit on that car. And it was to prove stuff out with the Mega Squirt. And I went to Holly on it. And the only reason why I went to Holly on it is because A, I was building the adapter. And two, I wanted to learn the system. I already had some familiarity with Holly, but I didn't use it in one of my own. I didn't use it as a daily, or just worked on it every day like you, familiarize. And I wanted to make the adapter, and I wanted to make sure I would trust the ECUs. I knew people running Dominators. I knew people running HPs. They've had no issues. But the Terminator X, when you, for anybody out there, if you ever hold a Terminator X in your hand and then you hold an HP, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because the first time I ever the HP and Dominators are bricks. They feel sturdy. They feel like when you spend that type of money, it makes sense. When you hold a Terminator in your hand, you're afraid you might hold it too tight and break it. And that's not a pick on Holly. The difference is the other ones are potted and they're in a metal case. Terminator X's, if you haven't used one, they're in a plastic case and not potted. So they are simply light. There's not much to them. So it just feels to me like a cheaper product. It is a cheaper product, but yeah, it just didn't feel good. And so I wanted to make sure I felt comfortable with it, and that's why I took my car completely backwards, put in all the factory components, and then went to a Holly on it to get used to it. And I'm eventually going to pull the Holly out of it for personal reasons. Not, I'm going to run a couple of different other ECUs in that car, but the nice benefit now is because we have universal adapters. I can keep the adapter in, just switch out my main harness, and I can be to a different ECU in 20 minutes.
Right.
So,
let me ask you this:
yeah.
Since you have more experience with the HP and stuff like that, would you say that the NTK sensor has better longevity than the Bosch 4.9, or do you think there's not really any truth to that?
You work at Ford. How often are you guys replacing O2 sensors in Coyote trucks? That's a Bosch 4.9.
We've seen some come in to get replaced at it depends on how, a supercharged one breaks down easier. So I've seen those get replaced at 80,000 miles.
That's a Bosch 4.9.
Right.
They last as long as, I got an 09 Audi that I bought used years ago, and you saw it. I drive it. Hell, I did delivery to you guys in that car.
Yep.
It's got a Bosch 4.9, and it's the original. I got 200,000 on that car. So
what do you think the stigma is? Maybe this is the last thing we should leave off on for the night. What do you think the stigma is with people complaining that the Bosch 4.9 sensor in the Terminator X fails too easily? What do you think that stigma is all about?
User install issues.
Thank you.
If you want to kill a Bosch 4.9, let it build condensation on it. As soon as condensation touches the element, they die. And they die instantly. So what most people do is they either don't have enough piping after, they have an exhaust leak near it to build condensation, or they have it at the wrong angle. They don't look at it at the correct format on how it should be installed. They do it incorrectly. If you look at how OEMs installed their narrow bands are the same way. If you get any water on any oxygen sensor, you gotta remember those things get heated up, and they get heated up to 500 plus degrees, depending on the sensor. So we're just gonna go narrow here.
Yep.
Putting cold water on that, what do you think is going to happen? crack, they break, they fail. That's what's happening to the Bosch stuff. Do that to your NTK, and I'll watch you cry because they are what $300 I think right now. I can't remember what they cost.
Yep.
They're not cheap.
They're close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Retail.
So I'm not against what you're doing at all. Like it's just if you're one of our customers, it'd probably be like I would probably sit down with you, ask a bunch of questions, and then make a decision on it. If you're going to do methanol, not methanol injection like you would do like with the Mr. Freeze kit you guys sell, but if you do true methanol fuel injection,
Right.
then I would
Like
be
pure methanol
then
fueling.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't even it wouldn't even be a question. It would be like you're going to NTK. But yeah, that's just my opinion on it. Doesn't mean much. I might have a penny around here on my desk, but that's about all it's worth. So
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that because, I mean, yes, I knew that the new Mustangs because the gateway that Rick offers for the 11 to 14 Mustang
yep,
just uses the stock wideband because it's a 4.9, so it
yep,
uses the Terminator X Max to work with all that.
yep.
But I was just curious to see. Now, granted, I have my wideband in a perfect spot. It's facing
Straight up and down.
100% north and south, and I've never had an issue with it since I've had it on the last couple of years.
Yep.
The reason I thought about changing is because I believe my oil seal in my turbo is going bad because my car smells like oil when it's running.
Okay.
And I can see that the flange are wet on the turbo.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that I'm going to need to, which I think is some of my fueling and stalling, or not stalling, but my issues with the wideband not reading what I think it's reading.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a time to replace it, probably because it got coated in oil at some point. So
yeah,
I'm going to replace the turbo and then replace that. So I was like, is now a good time to upgrade? But you're right. The Bosch 4.9 has been approved in O2 in OEM vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it only lasted 80,000 miles, that's more than I'm going to put on this car probably in its lifetime.
Yeah, I mean the green.
But if it's worth going to an NTK, being that I am at some point going to upgrade the crap out of this thing with a better motor, better transmission, bigger turbo, maybe changing to E85 with a dual hat fuel system that we're going to be engineering. Yeah, it's one of those things where I need more opinions.
Yeah.
Of people that actually have ran it because I've only just run Terminator X's because I've never had issues with them.
What you'll fall in love with quickly is system data logging. No longer needing the handheld to do a data log. And it stores it right on the ECU. That internal logging is magical in my opinion. And then you can actually do system logging. And you can actually see all the data values of all the sensors and everything in that data in those logs too. So if you're troubleshooting something, you guys use those Ford VCDSs, I think they're called, the big, tells you all the
big red things.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's basically what the system logs will look like. It'll have that detailed of information in it, which is kind of fun. Yeah. So if any,
so it might be worth.
All that there alone is worth it every day long, all day long. So like for us, the only ECUs we use is the X Max. If someone wants to go Terminator X, is the X Max. We don't ever use the stock X, the basic X, and the reason being is for the little bit more, you get a speed input without wasting an input. And now that V3's out, and if you have a T56, you can now run your reverse lockout off of one of the shift solenoids on the X Max without wasting a pin. So those features there alone are worth, because once you figure in the cost of doing a VSS to Hall effect sensor converter and all of that, and wasting an input cost wise, you start to get up there and it's almost just worth it. I mean, it's not hundreds of dollars to do the conversion. It's not, it's not even $100, but that's just one item. How many more items are you going to do? You start to see the rabbit hole, and it just makes sense to go down that path once you do it.
Right.
So we just do the X Maxes. We do HPs for some stuff, depending on what it is, and then everything else is Dominator in the Holly line. Um, if it's a full out custom stuff, it might be a custom ECU, so Motec.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you want more data than you know what to do with, then it's Dominator. Next up behind that, if you want crazy O2 readings, we'll do a Big Stuff 3 with a Gen 4 kit because it supports individual cylinder widebands, all Bosch 49s. You've never seen your head spin until you see 8 active O2s. Um, that's a lot of data, and it's amazing how far each one can read. So that's another option that we offer, but we are not stuck with just one ECU. We take the build into consideration. Fuel tech, I think Devin said it best. You'd have a better chance of getting me pregnant than me doing a fuel tech install. Um, Devin Van Hoof, sorry, I stole that from you, but you said it best because you can't. Now the new stuff might have changed. I haven't used it, but the last time I actually did use it to help somebody with a tune. Something as simple as turning the fan on after a certain RPM. So like I don't want it to turn on when I first start cranking. I want it to turn on after engine's running and temperature above whatever. You can't do that. It didn't support it. It was either on or off with temperature. You couldn't take cranking into it. No different than the Terminator X if you use the standard fan control. But
Right.
Terminator X gave you the option to build your own outputs with conditions. You didn't get that over there on Fuel Tech. So yeah, Devin's comment, and that's his example too. I mean, it's the very easiest example that people can understand. You can't do that, and I mean, you're spending that much money on an ECU. I would hope it could do that basic of a configuration, but it didn't. And like I said, I haven't touched it. I can't remember what series it was. I know they've come out with some newer ones, and because of that put me off, and I've never looked at it again. Haltech's pretty cool. I've done some Haltech stuff. They came out with the Nexus R3 and R5 setups. The only thing I have against those is I don't believe a PDM should be built into the ECU. I think they should be separate just due to electrical currents. And I only get that because of the stuff of what we do. And I understand how that stuff works and it just does not mix well. Now I know I'm going down a tangent and talking about stuff, but I know like Rob Dom, who's a pretty big YouTuber, he's got one of the R5s on his rotary, his 4 rotor, and he seems to have great luck with it unless we're just not seeing something. And I can't. I've met the guy multiple times in person. I can't see him hiding it, but I know people that have run the 3 and the 5, and maxing out the PDM stuff and running into overheating issues where the ECUs just turn off. Now I don't know if that's been fixed. That was like when they first came out, so people don't like start burning down the internet because of that comment. It's what we've seen, what we've heard, and I think they should be separate. And that's why like it's not Holly, but the smart wire stuff is just an amazing solution because it's its own PDM off to the side. It can take Holly data in with the race pack adapter, and then you get the best of both worlds. So, and the other
Cool.
reason behind the X Max for future reference for you is if you get the X Max and you go to V3, you now have 2 CAN networks, just like a Dominator. The HP doesn't have it. Only the X Max and the Dominators now support 2 CANs, where you can have your original CAN running Holly, but you remember some of those really cool retro race pack gauge clusters and stuff.
Sure.
You can set up the second CAN on the X Max to run race pack CAN, and you can run some of the really cool race pack stuff.
You know what's crazy? I actually have an X Max in this car.
Good man.
It wasn't my choice either. It just happened to be what was available, what Rick had available to
Yeah.
me. at the time. Now, full disclosure, how I got a Terminator X in this car. Uh, Again, this is probably like maybe the last thing I want to
Yeah.
touch on in regards to this, and we don't have to visit it again. I was a micro squirt guy. I wasn't sold on Holly EFI. Um, I was a micro squirt guy because my car was running good on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rick came by and said, "Hey, have you heard about the new Terminator X system for the Fox body?" I said, "I don't really care, to be honest with you, because I already got an ECU in my car." And then he asked me what I had. I said, "Micro squirt." He goes, "If I were to get you a kit, a Holly kit, would you install it?" I'm like, well, I guess if you're going to get me one, I can't really say no because that's a free ECU kit
Yeah.
and stuff. And he goes, "Yeah, let me see what I can do for you. Let me get you a kit, and then I'll let you, you know, test it out for yourself." So sure enough, he came in with a box that was thrown together with a bunch of different parts from different kits that you could tell. He pretty much put it together on the fly, I think. He had an X Max ECU, a 128 harness, a power harness.
Mm-hmm.
The handheld, I think, was maybe one of his own personal ones because it didn't have the stylus or it didn't have any of the pieces and stuff with
Yeah.
it and stuff. It was just loose in the box and stuff. And you know, whatever. I mean, it was nice of him enough to do
Oh yeah.
that, everything. But yeah, I wasn't a believer until I actually got in the car. And that's how I got an X Max in this car because that just happened to be an ECU he had, and he wanted to put it together for me.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so how I became, and he was right. I became hooked on it. So yeah. So full disclosure, I got that kit given to me from my representative at Holly
Mm-hmm.
because he truly believed in it and he thought I would fall into in love with it and he was right. So
It's hard not to. It's a very simple ECU to set up and go.
yeah.
What transmission do you have in that?
Right now a TR 3550.
Oh, an old school 3550.
That's right. Nachi, I can't shift it fast,
No, they
but
weren't
it
meant to be
works.
shift fast.
It's a monster. It's a beast.
Yeah, that's
It could probably deserves to be in a dump truck.
yeah, the 3550 and then so that's the I had one of those. That was the same transmission that came in the Cobra R and then you could buy them to put in your car. And then they came out with the TKO which was supposed to fix some of the notchiness but seemed to make it worse. And then they
Yeah.
came out with the revised was it the TKO 506? Yeah, 500 600s, which was, that's how much they were rated to withstand.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you weren't shifting those things at 7,000 RPM. That just
Nope.
the Hulk might
Not
have.
easily.
The Hulk could have done it,
Yeah.
but I think it would have shot out an output shaft as well. Um, the TKX is where it's at if you want to stay 5-speed.
That's what I'm going to do.
Okay,
That's in the plans. Yep.
and that's an easy swap for you. You don't have to buy anything other than as long as you already have a 26 spline input shaft on that, you can just swap it right out.
I don't. I have a 10 spline, but we just came out with our high rev clutches.
Okay.
And so I have 26 spline clutches. I actually have one of those high rev clutches and 10 spline in here.
Okay.
Because this is actually a 10 spline transmission because we swapped input shafts because I didn't have a 26 at the time.
Okay.
My buddy happened to have a 10 spline input shaft lying around, so we swapped it real quick and then we installed it in the car.
Okay. So I know we're going to get on an episode because you just brought it up though. Your high revving clutches. Talk about that for a minute. So I know what makes them. I'm just curious. This is more for me. Is
Sure.
What makes them different than say like a high ram clutch or a ram clutch? Sorry, not a high ram, but a ram clutch.
Ram clutch. Sure. It's all in the disc. It's all in the disc. It's the materials used. It's the proper measurements of the Marcel spring, which is the spring in between both sides of the disc itself. That space in between has a spring in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a Marcel spring. It's properly measured out, properly rated, and then the materials on the disc itself are important to be able to handle high RPM.
Yep.
And no slipping or no lockout, because at that high of an RPM and stuff, you could cause like a weird vacuum effect where it like suck the pedal down and not come back up because of how much rotating mass there is. So it's just the disc itself. You'll probably notice also the fingers on the clutch pressure plate are smaller
Okay.
because there's um, what's the word for it? Essentially less. Gosh,
You
I
know,
really wish I would have known you asked me this question because I would have done better.
it's okay.
Be
I threw you on the spot.
prepared for this. Yeah, but essentially it's just the materials
Yeah.
being used in the clutch,
Okay.
the design of the clutch itself, and stuff like that to be able to handle one, keep the pedal pressure light,
Okay.
like close to stock, and also be able to handle high RPM without lockout or the vacuum effect sucking the clutch pedal in when you're shifting it like 7,000, 7,500 or whatever.
What are you guys rating those for? Like, what would you say? No more. What's the horsepower rating on one?
10 spline 550
Okay.
and the 26 spline 650.
Okay. And do you know the pricing off the top of your head or no?
The 10 spline is just under 400
Okay.
and the 26 spline is 460, 470. Don't quote me on
Yeah,
that because I don't have it in front of me.
folks, don't hold him on pricing. He's at home. So,
Right.
Um.
But it's a cool clutch because I've actually tested these, and actually this is the same clutch Ron Anderson ran back in the day when he was running an MRA and
Okay.
shifting at really super high RPM and stuff. And the crazy thing is, and why I'm a true believer in the clutch, I am running in both of them in both my Fox bodies.
Okay.
Like this one here has one, and this has got a 3550 transmission. So I don't shift this car very high, but my red car, I take it to 6,500 RPM, no problem. And that's got a stock bottom end 302, but it's got a high rev cam
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a high rev clutch. Goes up to 6,500, no problem. So it's not even touching it.
Good.
But I'm super impressed with the pedal effort. Being a single disc clutch to handle that amount of power, usually you're talking like spec stage 2 or some kind of clutch that's, or like a Super King Cobra or something like that, where you feel like you're driving a tank. And the pedal effort is so dang heavy, it's not even fun to drive. These things are super light.
Are they? Okay.
Like barely higher above stock. I love them.
I might have to pick one up. I actually still run the King Cobras. I still have a stockpile of them. Because I don't think you can get those anymore. I think Ford discontinued them years ago.
Ford discontinued them, but you can get what's called the
heavy duty
Super King Cobra from ProMotion Powertrain.
Yeah.
So it's not an official Ford Performance or Ford Racing.
Yeah, mine are still in the
version.
Ford. Mine are the Ford Racing, still in the Ford Racing boxes. There was a speed shop out in Greeley, Colorado, when I lived out that way, that was going out of business, and they had like a dozen of them on the shelf. And when they're going out of sale, a lot of that stuff's on fire, right? They sell it pretty cheap. So I bought them all. And some of them were a mix. Some of them were 10 spline, some were 26 spline. And yeah, I still run one. And you're right. I mean, if you miss leg day at the gym, you were going to be hurting on trying to shift your car.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm kind of curious. I have to eventually probably try one out.
Yeah, I'd say it's a single disc clutch, guys. It's that's the thing. It's a single disc clutch that can handle that amount of power and also shift it higher than normal RPM and not kill your leg when you're pushing in the clutch. That's what really sold the pedal effort is what really sold me on it, because most aftermarket clutches never feel like stock. This one literally, I mean, yes, it's heavier because it's aftermarket and it's got to be able to handle some power, but you'll be really surprised. You'll think that this thing can't handle any power because of how light it feels. But I beat the crap out of this turbo car here.
Yeah.
And I only shipped this one at 6,000, but this thing's making like 540 foot-pounds of torque.
Okay.
I'm right at the limit of what this thing can handle. No problem.
Do you guys recommend going to like a clutch quadrant on it, or if someone hasn't upgraded?
Yes, I highly recommend a firewall adjuster, and if you can find one,
a Ford cable.
OEM Ford cable. I'm running a 96 to 04 on the turbo car because I wanted to clear the headers of the turbo.
Yep.
I decided to go ahead and put one of those on my other Fox body as well because I had this like an old EPR cable or something on it, and it was getting stiffer and stiffer. So I had a feeling it was going to break soon. So I put an OEM Ford one. Unfortunately, these cables have been discontinued from Ford. You can probably still find some out there. If not, it's my fault. I'm sorry. But if you can find an OEM Ford cable, Fox body or 96 to 04 with the firewall adjuster and aluminum quadrant, go for it. You'll love yourself for it.
I'm going to let people know that I'm still running stock quadrants on all of my cars. No firewall adjusters, all stock. Every single one of them. I'm going to
Nice.
hate the day when I have to switch them out.
Well, unfortunately, those cables you can't buy new anymore, and I don't know why no one's come out with a good replacement aftermarket cable. All of them just seem to be crap. I don't
I,
know why.
I'm shocked Maximum Motorsports hasn't tried. I'm sure they probably might. I could be wrong. But yeah, you're right. No one, all the other ones have, I've never seen reviews wise have ever been really good. I actually was, I would actually go through junkyards and pick up V6 stock harness, stock clutch cables, because most of the times those cars were babied all the time, anyways. It was pretty rare.
Or they didn't make enough power to break a clutch cable or whatever.
So I always had a process of I would bring them home, clean them up, spray oil down inside of the cable ends, so it would get down inside, and put them in a bag with some oil and just lock them up. And I kept I probably have a dozen of them, and because I knew one day, and
You
if
still
anybody's
have
in
them?
this, they're going to discontinue. Parts discontinue.
Mm.
The reason why we focused on the SN95 stuff is because no one really does. The 9495 is the redheaded stepchild that no one cared about. So that's why we did. That's why our adapter came out for the 9495 first, which shocked people. So, well, folks, we've been at this for about 2 hours. We're going to probably call this. And what I'm going to recommend is if you guys like what you're hearing and you have topics you'd like us to discuss, leave a comment. Donnie, you got anything else you want to throw in real quick?
I don't think so. This was fun. We got to talk about a pretty good range of topics.
Yep.
And we got plenty more we can talk about, of course.
Absolutely.
So it's good to talk to you and everything.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to do it again if you'll have me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this will be something we don't have. Donnie and I haven't really come up with a schedule of how often we're going to do these. We're kind of going to throw this one out there, kind of see what the reviews are. I don't know if we're going to do like every 2 weeks or once a month. None of that's been discussed. We're kind of just flying off the cuff here and giving this a go. So if you've made it this far, congrats. But yeah, we do want to plan on doing more of these, and eventually we might actually do some of these live to take live Q&A. It just all depends on how they go. But yeah, we'll definitely do more of these in the future.